Hi to Michelle and to Hannah and Alexis, and maybe we'll see some other people there. Um, I'm remembering to ask if anyone has any show and tell or questions about anatomy and physiology. So Michelle, I'm wondering if you would unmute yourself. All right, can I unmute you? There.
I
Michelle,
got
you're
it.
unmuted.
Okay.
How are you?
Not too bad. Yourself?
I'm good. I'm kind of sailing along. It's getting more existential for me all the time. I don't think that's unusual, but I'm really noticing it maybe more than most people because I have a lot of language for that. But yeah, all my projects are going on. I try to do everything with God as my partner, and that seems to make things go more smoothly. So things are going smoothly. I'm getting my questions answered on anatomy and physiology and the nervous system. So any questions or topics or articles you're looking into?
I've actually just wanted to share with everyone that I came across someone on YouTube that I think is absolutely phenomenal for the anatomy and physiology part. It's Dr. Matt and Dr. Mike, and they're professors out of Australia. So it's just, if anyone's looking for something, and some of the videos are a bit longer, but most of them are fairly short. And it's been awesome. And then
Good.
as far as reading material, I picked up a book called Keep Your Brain Alive, and it's talking about neurologic exercises, to get yourself off of the hamster wheel and start doing different things. Like say you come home, you put your keys down, you do this, you do that. And they're talking about just switching up one sense thing to see how it goes. So keep the lights off when you walk in the door, see if you know where you're going. Just using different senses to try and keep yourself sharp. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So I'm just in the beginning of it. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, those I celebrate those things, and probably the best things like that out now that I'm aware of are Deb Dana's polyvagal exercises, and you can look this up. It's a very big topic, and she has a whole book of exercises that are like that, but more sophisticated and perhaps more beneficial. So worth looking at if you get into that. If you like that book,
Absolutely.
her book next.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Well, I'm going to get into this because people might want to see the recording. So I'm going to go into my screen share and click this and share this. And now I think you are all not seeing me. You're seeing this colorful picture of a brain, what I call the brain hologram. And if anybody's not seeing that, let me know. I'm showing this picture because it's the best picture I know of a brain as a hologram. So each blob of light is suggested to be communicating or connected with every other blob of light in this hologram. And that's how the brain works in a thumbnail sketch. And it's remarkable that somebody's produced a picture of it that gets that across, because I don't know of any other pictures like that. There aren't even very many good pictures of holograms. And this really captures that 3D quality of everything connecting to everything else. And this is the current science fiction book I'm reading. It's a 2022 science fiction book about how octopi become sentient. And there's a lot of quotes in this that are really good. And one that really fit for me is this. With our left brain, we now understand the encoding of genetic sequences, the folding of proteins to construct cells in the body. We even understand a good deal about how epigenetic switches control these processes. What we have yet to understand is what happens when we read a sentence. Meaning is not mere smudges of ink on a page, nor is it meaning in light and dark on a screen, nor is meaning merely neuronal calculus in the brain. Meaning has no mass or charge. Meaning occupies no amount of physical material space. Lisa's here. And yet meaning contains all the differences in the quality of our human experience. So I'm aware in medical schools, neurology is taught as if every thought, feeling, and behavior arises somehow from tissues, genes, and DNA. And I think probably everyone here, not just me, perceives that as kind of a sad and one-sided and depressing point of view, even though you can make a lot of money with that point of view. And I believe it makes no sense to teach kinesiology students anatomy in this one-sided way. Why? You have already proven to yourself there is something living inside you and in clients apart from our physical material body, which animates our body and that which you can dialogue with through testing. And I believe the whole brain neurology teaches this way. It teaches two things are true at the same time. First, humans are more than just dead body parts. We have a head brain and a gut brain. And second, the dead body parts and their names are useful for navigating to the living parts you want to connect with, talk with, and unburden. This is how I believe we can get beyond the one-sided left brain approach to the nervous system, which medical schools and the internet are so full of. I mean, just spent a week with them. I can tell you they're still doing that. And so if there's other people teaching this ways, I'd love to hear about it. And if there are SIPS ideas that I'm not aware of that support a two-sided view of neurology, please feel free to put your hand up or say something, and we'll start a conversation on that in this class. Any questions so far? Oh, Lisa, do you have any show and tell by any chance? You do?
No, I'm having difficulty finding the homework. Or is there something or you just want us to bring show and tell every time?
I am open to having show and tell every time. The homework comes by email.
Okay, because I haven't gotten that. Was there homework for tonight?
That's an issue for Hannah.
Okay.
No, there was no I Am Joe's Body part. There was not.
Okay.
It doesn't have a thing for that. And I didn't find anything comparable. That's basically how I got into the slideshow, trying to create something comparable.
Okay. All right. So no, I'm sorry, I don't have any show and tell.
Okay. So I'll keep asking because that's a good thing. All right. So I want to go back to the experiment with making a fist. And you will remember, I think it was last week, I said, hold up your hand and tell your hand to make a fist, but don't make a fist. And not much happens. And then go ahead and make a fist and you can do it. And what's the significance of this? Well, one significance is that humans do not think with their nerves. We don't think with our nerves. And all the propaganda that we think with our nerves is not as useful as it thinks it is. We think through our nerves. We think through our nerves. Now, I wish it was this simple, but of course it's not, because there are three levels of thinking. We have it when we're awake, we have a conscious level, a dreaming level, and a sleeping level, and we're coming to that next. Second, the experiment with the fist says that there's at least one more living being inside us that's not altogether our conscious self. And our conscious self benefits from learning about and cooperating with this second invisible internal part. Because of these facts, complicated as they may be, mysterious as they may be, invisible as they may be, a focus on dead body parts alone is at most only 1/2 of a living neurology. But tonight, we are going to give the body parts their due. Any questions? Okay, I'll take that as a good sign. So moving on. So here's another picture. This picture has a lot of uses, and you will get, I will send a copy of the slideshow to Hannah to circulate. And so you will have an image of this if you don't have one. You know, this picture represents our waking psyche. So you'll notice that there's some water there, and there's a part of our psyche that's above the water line, and then a larger part that's below the water line. And I think this will be intuitively obvious to a lot of people, but maybe not to everybody. So the key part here is not so much the top and the bottom. We get that. It's more the middle part. What's that dreaming subconscious part? And who is that, right? So that's where the inner child is. And we can make another picture of this that would label that the inner child, the lower self, child within. There's 22 or more names for that. And one of the reasons that neurology as body parts falls into error is that it doesn't make allowances for these three levels that our neurology works on. And what's useful is the idea of a head brain and a gut brain, which is kind of a simplified version of this iceberg image. So the head brain would be above the waterline, the cerebral nervous system, and the gut brain would be the sleeping part down here at the bottom of the iceberg. And so these things work together. And I think it creates a really nice hologram about neurology, which there's a lot you can do with it. So if you want to, we're going to leave the metaphors now pretty much. And if you want more metaphors, they're in the new energy anatomy book and the holistic neurology book, which has a new edition coming out soon. So if you have questions, just blurt them out. Otherwise, we have 40 slides to get through. So here's me playing basketball. Aren't I handsome? The sympathetic nervous system, or NS, which I'll sometimes say, is part of our autonomic nervous system. It's part of your neurology under your direct control and direction. It's also in charge of your fight or flight response. When you come across a threat, your sympathetic NS kicks into gear, quickly changing body processes like breathing and heart rate, so you have extra energy to face danger or run away. And that's, if we go back to the iceberg, the fight or flight is more in the subconscious part. Is it in the whole thing? It could be, because the reptile brain's down here, and is that part of the fight or flight? Yeah. You know, so there's some good questions there to play with. And we want flexibility with our ideas there. And then there's this part. Our parasympathetic nervous system governs contrasting behaviors. It's the brake pedal to the sympathetic nervous system's gas pedal. Parasympathetic takes over for rest and digest, behavior to bring you back to normal after danger or stress has passed. And I don't think there'll be any questions on that. If you do, let me know. So we're going to work from the outside in. And here's a nice cutaway picture of the brain. It's not too gross. Our brain is about the size of 2 clenched fists. It weighs about 3 pounds. Our brain needs a lot of energy. It uses about 50% of the oxygen and 10% of the glucose in our arterial blood. And moving forward. So here's the outside of the brain, which is mostly a picture of the cortex. And the cortex is almost all gray matter. And it's involved with muscle control, sense perceiving, memory, emotion, and speech. The gray matter is where the neurons are and the nerve cells. And let's go to animal brains. So what does the cortex do? So this is a very good slide for, oh, what does the cortex do? So whether you're a human or a cat or a mouse, your cortex helps you think. And the picture shows that you might be thinking of anatomy class, but a cat is thinking of a mouse and a mouse is thinking of cheese. And that's all okay, all appropriate. And then here's a close-up of the gray matter, and you can see that the gray matter literally sits on top of the white matter. This pink part down here is the white matter, and the gray matter is on top. And if you ever thought that the brain was like a labyrinth, where you know about Theseus and the Minotaur, this is where that archetype really has really shines, because our gray matter is very labyrinthine. Now, I found this great slide here about the significance of the gray matter. And I didn't see this stuff anywhere else, so I found this quite interesting. So here's my show and tell. So this, you won't be able to read this, so I'm going to kind of summarize it for you here. IQ has less to do with size of brain per se. IQ is more related with the amount of gray matter. Meditation may increase gray matter. Between men and women, there are essentially no disparities in general intelligence. However, men do have 6.5 times more gray matter than women. I find it hard to believe, but that's what it says. And then Bruce says, this may explain why it is primarily men who get trapped in one-sided left brain cortical thinking. This may also explain why women are much more likely to not get trapped in one-sided left brain cortical thinking and can use both sides of their brain more equally. Children with autism have too much gray matter. This may explain why, compared to women, many men seem autistic. It's funny, but I also think it's true. One more point from this chart. Pathological liars have a gray matter deficit. So raise your hand if you think it's possible that George Santos has a gray matter deficit based on this idea. If you don't know who George Santos is, he's all over the internet now, and he's on every late night comedy show monologue because he's a pathological liar, and he's not even getting better at it. Every night there's basically a new lie being reported on the late night comedy shows. It's kind of ridiculous. Any questions? So far, so good, I guess.
Not a
Okay.
question, but I read something the other day. I was sharing it with Hannah that, and I don't have the exact numbers with me anymore, but basically that recent studies are showing that this next generation of high school students has less gray matter than the previous one. And the article I was reading was blaming it on TikTok. Like blaming it on social media and smartphones in general, but like TikTok specifically, because what we are doing is training ourselves to not pay attention to things for more than like 20-second bursts of time. And because kids are doing it at the time that they should be developing strong neural nets and reinforcing the gray matter, it's like that pruning that's supposed to happen at adolescence is getting all messed up. So this author, and I didn't go and fact check them, but this author was suggesting that this will be the first generation where we don't actually see an average increase in IQ because of TikTok. Anyway, I thought it was interesting.
Well, I thank you for sharing that. I agree. I agree. It's more than TikTok, but it's a screens generally, and also bad nutrition, bad air, bad food, everything. Yeah. Yeah. Amen to that. Any comments? Any other comments? Lisa?
Yeah, does if you have a gray matter deficit, does that necessarily mean you will lie? Or is it just lying is one possible manifestation?
I missed that. You have a great matter deficit. What?
Well, you said that the pathological liars are have gray matter deficit. So my
Right.
question is like the flip of that. If you have gray matter deficit, then are you prone to lying, or is lying
Yes.
only one manifestation of it?
No, it makes sense. The gray matter is where you process and anticipate the consequences of your thoughts, actions, and behaviors. And if you don't have ability to process and anticipate the consequences of your thoughts, actions, and behaviors, you will say, I could just make up anything I want. This is very related to psychopaths. If you look at psychopaths and narcissists, they probably, a lot of them have less gray matter as well. They're not processing. And when we talk about critical thinking, we really mean independent thinking, which is a little nicer term. But critical thinking is this idea of the consequences and the debating and the pros and cons. All that happens in the gray matter. If you don't have it, you do less of it. Does that help?
Yeah, it's scary too.
Yep, it's very scary. And of course, and the good news is it's scaring people to eat better and to spend more money on better food, and not, don't buy the junk food, and get rid of the sugar and the carbs and, the glyphosate and all that other crap, and drink more water and get more sleep. So there are pockets of people who are quite healthy.
Now, if from our perspective, being muscle testers, do we have anything we can do about this, or you'll get to that later? I mean, should we just assume, what I've always known about sociopaths and so on, that there's nothing you can do. They're who they are, and they'll never change, no matter what we do.
It's a big topic. It's a little far afield here. I basically agree with you that there's a lot of problems here. I think the best lens to view that problem is a stage developmental lens. And so if, when you're an infant and you miss some natural, normal, healthy stage development sequences, then you're kind of stuck until later in life, where you might possibly, perhaps, have the time and the money to work on some therapy, right? But if you don't, then you're kind of stuck at that level that, you're left with after puberty or after high school. It's very sad. It's the sad truth that a lot of people don't want to face. And that holistic people have been working to counter and to support people since the 70s. So yeah. So let's not go into psychopaths more at the moment.
Bruce, I have one
Go ahead.
more question about the stats that you mentioned on the last slide.
Go ahead.
You said that men tend to have more gray matter than women.
That's
And I
what
was wondering if that's proportional, like if that's been.
I have never seen that statistic before, Hannah. So
Okay.
I am kind of interested in, like, hey, where'd they get that from? Because I think
I would be interested to know more, because I could kind of read it on the screen. It didn't seem like it said, so I wasn't sure if you had seen it somewhere else. Because I would love to know if it's
I have not.
proportional to the rest of the brain
Well,
and like the size of the person, rather than.
I think you're right to flag it and mention it. 6.5 times more gray matter in men than women. It seems kind of unbelievable. You would think it would be like 10% or 20% if it was that. But it is resonant, Hannah. It's not proven by, it's not a fact, but it is resonant with how mental men are compared to women, and how one-sidedly mental, and how trapped men get in mentalizing compared to women. Some women get trapped in that, but far, far fewer, right? So it's a very interesting fact that we have not yet to see the research on. Yes, that you could probably write a very good paper on if you liked writing papers, or a book. We're never going to get through 40 slides here. We're having too much fun. So back to the white matter. So in adults, white matter takes up about 60% of the brain, which is kind of this picture here. It allows for communication to pass to and from gray matter areas in the labyrinth. Gray matter actually stops processing communication. So that's a little bit of the corpus callosum topic, and I'm not an expert on this, but I think that's likely true. In the cerebrum, white matter connects different parts of gray matter to each other. So underneath the gray matter, which is kind of this outer part here that's shaded here in this little outer part there, the white matter is filled with different passages, links, and paths to take, each one with a different destination and purpose. Where gray matter is more focused on and useful for outer problem solving, white matter concerns itself more with internal brain support and nourishment issues. Now let's talk about the coloring here, because we don't really have gray matter and white matter. Gray matter and white matter is an artifact of what happens to brain matter when it's stained in the laboratory. Some of you will know that in bacteriology, there is gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. It's exactly that thing. When the cortex is stained in the lab, it turns gray. When the white matter is stained in the lab, it turns white or stays white. But in reality, in living brains, the cortex is a bit grayer, a bit darker, and the white matter is pinkish, because there's what makes it white is the myelin, which is very similar to lecithin. And some of you may have lecithin in your kitchen, especially if you ever try to make candy bars for yourself. If you pick up a candy bar, especially a regular commercial candy bar, not a health food bar, you'll almost always see lecithin because it's an emulsifier. So lecithin is the thing you can eat that's similar to myelin. And myelin is the thing that you lose when you have multiple sclerosis. So when we myelinate a nerve, we're insulating it, just like there's rubber around the metal wires in your lamp plugging into the wall. It's exactly analogous to that. And in multiple sclerosis, all that wiring, all that insulation has worn off. So that's about what I want to say about the cortex. Yes, one more thing. So people who have autism have been found to have white matter abnormalities. Mostly the tracks and pathways in this type of matter fail to reach distances far away from the brain's cortex. Our white matter is the connecting link between different gray matter parts. And in autistic people, the train didn't travel very far and the train didn't reach its destination. And that's a very clear explanation of what is going on in autistic people. And I think we'll skip that. Now, in infants, there's a strong connection between breastfeeding and white matter growth. Breastfeeding increases a child's myelination. Myelination determines the growth of overall matter content in a child's brain. It's been shown by age 2 breastfed infants have improved brain development over bottle-fed infants, drinking powdered formula. Any questions? All right. So this will also be familiar to probably all of you. This is how our brain, our different parts of our psyche really talk to each other in the body mind spirit complex hologram, and the glial. Let's see. The axon releases a neurotransmitter. The neurotransmitter is picked up by the dendrite of another neuron. The neurotransmitter is turned into an electrical signal. Sensory neurons respond to things like sound, smell, and touch and deliver information to your brain. Motor neurons bring messages from your brain to your muscles. Now, I'm not a big fan of motor and sensory neurons, but apparently Rudolf Steiner was wrong, and this is somewhat of a fact, though probably next week we'll look at a little bit more at sensory and motor and afferent and efferent. No questions, we're moving on. Another thing about neurons, here's a nice summary of neurons. They detect, they integrate, and they allow for response. That sums up a lot of what we'd like to know. And then it's actually Alexis who taught me a great story here, and I may ask her to tell it here. Does anyone besides Alexis know why it's a myth that we only use 10% of our brain? Apparently not. Alexis, would you like to tell this story, or do you want me to tell the story? Or she might be turned off. Okay,
I'm not sure which story you actually mean.
we were
I talk too
talking about
much.
Alexis and I were talking about the idea you only use 10% of your brain, and she just laid it out beautifully, that the other 90% of our brain is the glial cells, which comes from the Greek word for glue. And in this picture on the slide, the red cells are the glial cells. I don't think they look like this in real life, but it's the best picture I could find. This is definitely on a slide, not in real life. But if these red cells are 90% of our brain stuff, then they're being used all the time. They're what keeps the other 10% going. And so we're using 100% of our brain, as much of our brain as we can. We just have to think about, if you're only using 10% of your brain as a kind of myth, kind of a myth from before World War II. So I don't know. So we talked about that. Yeah, and the glial cells clear debris, they clear dead neurons, and help repair injuries involving the nervous system. So if you didn't have your glial cells, you wouldn't have any thinking going on. So you need that support system for the thinking part of the brain. So moving on, here's a really good slide about depression. And this picture is showing that there's too little activity in the front part of the brain over the eyes. And if that part of the brain has reduced function, that's kind of what we call depression. Yeah. Depression doesn't just affect your mood. The disorder can change your brain. Experts say depression lessens activity in some brain areas, including prefrontal lobes. These brain parts are involved with things like reasoning, personality, and judgment. One study found people who were depressed for more than a decade had about 30% more brain inflammation. This can lead to brain cell loss, making memory problems and dementia more likely. And related to that, here's a picture of, here's your brain on alcoholism. And so this is pretty dramatic. I don't know if there's more than alcoholism going on here. I kind of wonder if on the right, we're also seeing a brain that's not only alcoholic, but also has some diabetes of the brain, which is a way of understanding Alzheimer's, early stage Alzheimer's. That looks pretty dramatic to me, even compared to other pictures I was looking at.
Bruce, can you explain what you mean by diabetes of the brain?
Yeah. When there's too much sugar in our bloodstream, the way I understand it is simple sugar molecules, monosaccharides, are shaped like a sheet of aluminum, a thin sheet of aluminum. And these pieces of aluminum, these single monosaccharide cells, have sharp edges. And so you don't want a lot of sharp edge pieces of aluminum floating around in your bloodstream or getting into your brain, because they can damage other cells. And this is apparently one of the mechanisms of diabetes. When your sugar is too high, there's too many of these sharp edge cells, monosaccharides, getting in your bloodstream, floating around, injuring other cells. And when that happens in the brain, then brain cells start to die, and they're much harder to bring back to life than lower in the body. And so as brain cells die, and if it happens from excess sugar, then I think that's a pretty good, that pretty much matches diabetes of the brain. Does that answer your question? I don't know how popular
It
that
does.
theory. Yeah, I don't know how well researched that idea is. That would be a great topic to look up on PubMed to see if Alzheimer's as diabetes of the brain is in PubMed. That would tell us whether it's a mainstream idea or not.
Yeah, because I wonder if the circumventricular organs would kind of stop that from happening.
The which organs?
Your circumventricular organs.
Don't know. Good question for PubMed. If you've never been to PubMed, I encourage everybody on this call to go to PubMed and look up a question you're curious about and see what's there. Because sometimes you'll find just what you want in the way that you want it. Not all the time, for sure. But there's actually a fair amount of holistic stuff in PubMed. And in case you don't know what PubMed is, that's the research that you pay for with your tax dollars. So there's a lot of stuff there, and some of it's useful to us.
I just wanted to add that Dr. David Perlmutter, who wrote
Yeah.
The Grain Brain, he believes that Alzheimer's is diabetes type 3, and so does Dr. Dale Dresden, who wrote the book about Alzheimer's. I forget the title. So they're, and they have a big following and so on. So there's a lot, I don't think it's totally, mainstream in the medical world, but they've really
I
put
agree.
that out there.
I agree. Lisa said it better than I did. Yeah. So I want to go to the triune brain here. And some of you will know that, let's start at the top here. So the triune brain is not the same as enteric nervous system or cerebral nervous system. These are two, this is a whole other model. The triune brain contains brain parts pertaining to both our gut brain and our head brain. What we want is a neurology as if self-connection mattered. Neurology that connects body, mind, spirit, instead of just separating them into pieces on a dissecting table. So some of you may know, let's see, I want to show this picture. And then there's another slide of the triune brain. So I don't know that this is particularly a better picture, but it's a different picture. And I've got another picture here. Now here's what you'll see on YouTube a lot, where the limbic system is called the emotional brain. This idea is a bit passé, and we're going to get into it a bit more here in the next slide. So here's what I'd like to say. This is what I made. The three brains are cooperative and collaborative. Each brain in the triune brain developed in response to an evolutionary need. There's the reptilian old brain, which is, the one in the middle, in the center, in the one closest to the center. Then the limbic brain, which I think of as not so much the emotional brain. I think that's accurate. I'm not disputing that, but I think it's much more descriptive to call it the fish school brain or the flock brain, as in a flock of birds. And if you've ever been around middle school students, or if you ever went to middle school yourself, you might know that middle schoolers travel in flocks and think like flocks and want to be doing what the crowd is doing. That is flock brain thinking. And that's a very good description of what's likely going on in the limbic brain. So the cerebrum is the outer part, the new brain, the thinking brain, and each layer has separate functions, but all three interact substantially. There's no one's going it alone here. And then I'm going to hold on this slide a little bit here. Some of you may know that around 2002, the triune brain was discredited because electronic brain imaging could not verify nor validate that the activity triune brain says was happening in different parts of the brain, this picture, was actually happening in those parts of the brain. So they threw the baby out with the bathwater. The triune brain was kind of thrown out. But the triune brain is coming back again. The triune brain is coming back as a, what do they call it? The adaptive brain. I learned this week. So the adaptive brain is everything happening at once. The three brains did not evolve in a sequence. They all evolved together. They don't function independently. They interact like a 3D hologram. However, I still think that compared to gut brain and head brain, the triune brain is, they're both very good models, introductory models for what's going on. And they, each of them lead into staged developmental topics of neurofunction. So I think they're both useful. I also think that the adaptive brain, what I saw this week, is that the adaptive brain is bringing things closer to the idea of the inner child and a living being inside of us who's lesser than the conscious self, but still intelligent. So I found that quite striking and amusing. Any questions? I have a link here for the adaptive brain if anyone's interested. It'll be in the notes that I circulate if you want to know where the adaptive brain came from and how it might be similar to the inner child. So you see this every now and again, that the hard science, the skeptical science, the Dr. Frankenstein science is kind of backing into holistic ideas, including the inner child, backing in. All right. So talked about those. So now we're into talking about brain parts here. And we have some really nice pictures. And this is one of them. And what you'll see here is one of the amygdala. And there's two of them. And I assume that the other one is just hiding behind this other one here. Yeah. The thalamus is in the middle. This is a basal ganglia, the purple. And behind the other basal ganglia is the other amygdala. It's the best picture I could find. The almond-shaped area, the amygdala is the almond-shaped area responsible for your emotions and some behavior. It's believed your amygdala helps you do everything from forming memories to picking up on social cues. It sounds the alarm that triggers fight or flight. And I don't think that will be news to any of you. Here's a really good picture of the cerebellum. Your cerebellum oversees complicated movements, posture, and balance. It coordinates different muscle groups and fine-tunes movements with practice, like hitting a golf ball or a hockey puck. Because of it, walking can be a smooth, continuous motion. Hippocampus. And we have one of these on each side near the center of our brain. And these help us to learn and remember important who, what, when, and where details, like your boss's name and the location of your house, and turn short-term memories into long-term ones. It's one of the first areas damaged by Alzheimer's disease. And the thalamus. The top part of your brainstem is kind of like a post office for your senses. It gets signals related to sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch, and passes information to other parts of your brain. And there's a good slide here, descriptive slide here. And this will be in, if we're able to circulate the slides, you'll have a copy of this also, in case you want to read how that's, get into that more. And over here we have the pons, not to be confused with the fawns from television. This is the key relay station in the middle part of our brainstem and a bridge between the cerebrum and the cerebellum. It's the origin of nerves that control facial expressions, eye movement, and bladder control. It may be where our dreams happen also. But again, another topic you could look up in PubMed and see how true that is and how far they've got on that. And here's our friend, the medulla oblongata. It handles less conscious priorities that you don't think about, like breathing, blood pressure, and heart rate. It plays a major role in chewing, swallowing, and breathing. It's found at the bottom of the brainstem, where it helps transfer signals between the brain and spinal cord.
Bruce, where did all these blue brain pictures come from?
These blue brain pictures come from WebMD.
Okay.
The others do not, but these do. And I think they're pretty new. Don't know if they're copyrighted or how that goes, but they were the most beautiful pictures that I saw.
Yeah, they're very interesting. So I'm gonna find them.
Okay, so now we go back to this kind of stuff. So everybody knows what this is. And what I learned is that our spinal cord is probably smaller than most people imagine. It's about 17 inches long, the diagonal of a large laptop screen. It's less than a ½ inch wide. It's thinner than an adult's finger. It runs from the base of your brain down your back, surrounded by vertebra. Bundles of nerves, protected by tissue and fluid, carry information back and forth between all parts of our neurology. And here is more of a diagram. So there are quite a few pictures like this online. And what I want to say about this is, first, let me give you the geography here. So over here it says parasympathetic, and here it says sympathetic. So that's good. So over here, over here, this is the enteric nervous system. So over here, everything that's under parasympathetic is the enteric nervous system. So here's the neurology of our gut brain, the nerves that go to our guts here. Actually, the stomach is here, part of the gut brain, kidneys here, yes. Stomach, actually the pancreas is here somewhere. I saw it, pancreas, duodenum, so on. Liver is here, So that's the enteric nervous system. And then over here is the cerebral nervous system. And not too surprising here. And I think the vagal nerve in this system, on the dissection table, the vagal nerve is considered as part of the cerebral nervous system, of the sympathetic nervous system. But I don't think that makes a lot of sense, because I think it makes more sense to put the vagus nerve over here. In fact, here it is actually. So I was a little bit wrong on that. So they already have the vagus nerve part of that, but the vagus nerve is a cranial nerve. So they're kind of having it both ways here too. The vagus nerve is a cranial nerve, comes out of the brain, but they call it part of the gut brain, the parasympathetic, the enteric nervous system. So there's some interesting terms being thrown around here kind of arbitrarily. And I want to talk about that in a moment here. This picture shows all the organs that the enteric nervous system goes to. I'm not sure the picture was designed for that, but I think it really also does that. So our enteric nervous system is kind of like that. And if you know a lot about the vagus nerve, you'll know the vagus nerve travels through all these organs. And so it's a pretty interesting picture for the enteric nervous system. Now, in terms of teaching this, I also think this slide is useful. So here's a funny picture of a guy sitting in front of a big sandwich. But it also makes you think of a toddler building a tower with wooden blocks. And that is how the enteric nervous system thinks. It's into building up tissues and breaking down tissues, building up and breaking down. That's what our enteric nervous system is very much involved with, among other things, involved with liking and disliking as well, more psychological things. But that's a very interesting slide for that aspect of it. And I looked up who invented the term sympathetic and parasympathetic, and it was this guy. And so you can look at the slide and see what he did. He was a British physiologist. And what I want to ask you is, and I don't think there's any reason to think badly of this person. Now, his job was physiology, and he innovated some great stuff. However, when we look at his picture today in 2023, do we think of this might be a person who is more head dominant or more gut dominant? Flip a coin.
I'll say head just because he's he's not an artist.
Well said, well said. Yeah, this kind of intense looking dude is clearly a head dominant kind of guy. And what I got interested in is that the terms sympathetic and parasympathetic are pretty abstract. They're pretty abstract. Sympathetic means sympathetic to the conscious self. Parasympathetic means not sympathetic to the conscious self. They're pretty not very specific. And what do we call these things now? We call them head brain and gut brain. And so head brain and gut brain are simpler and more direct and probably more useful terms than sympathetic and parasympathetic. And that was one of the big ahas of making this slideshow, that I think those newer terms will be replacing these older terms, that they have not much intrinsic value, and that it would be much easier to look at a slide like this and say, yep, over here we got the head brain nerves, over here we got I've got the gut brain nerves over here, sorry, and the head brain nerves over here, and here's the organs that the gut brain nerves are supporting. Yep. And over here we got the organs that the cerebral brain nerves are supporting. Yep. So, so there's a lot of simplifying I think can go on. Now we're approaching an hour here, and fortunately I'm about done. So I don't want to go into that, that. I kind of am at the end. There's one more picture here. So here's that same picture kind of shown separated. So over here is gut brain. Over here is cerebral brain. And over here is gut brain. And you can see that neither system can operate alone. That these two systems have to work together. They have to work as teammates. They have to work as partners. And this is the big insight of holistic neurology, and the big insight of anyone who likes the idea of head brain and gut brain. They're distinct, but they're not separate. They're distinct, but they're cooperative and collaborative like teammates. And that's what we want to start and end with in any story of holistic neurology. And here's my final slide. Any questions, comments, jokes?
Hey, Bruce. So sorry, are you saying that the enteric brain and the parasympathetic brain mean the same thing? Because that's really different than what I've heard before. I thought the enteric brain meant the nervous tissue of the gut.
We're quickly going to get out of my depth here. I think it depends, Alexis, on how you define them. So if you define the enteric nervous system as the total sum weight of the neurons, the nerve tissue in the gut brain, which is 1907 research that I have, that the Edgar Casey people preserved for decades, then you have a much wider definition of enteric nervous system than what you just said. Make sense? So it depends how you define it.
So you're saying that the parasympathetic is the same as the enteric?
I think that's the most useful concept. Whether it's technically the same, and I'm not even sure what the enteric shoe is, or the gut shoe is. That might be a real thing. And maybe that's probably what I should be looking up on PubMed next. Yeah. But we're not surgeons, and we're not on the dissecting table. We're trying to understand this in a way that our clients can grasp, take a hold of, and become friends with their own neurology. And that's why I think the more broad definition of enteric as the gut brain makes a lot of sense, has more usefulness.
Okay,
But feel
thank
free
you.
to define it. Yeah, feel free to define it the way you need to. Other questions? Okay, so if there aren't, next week we'll go into more about the nerves. We'll look at the pictures of the nerves and talk about the afferent and efferent and more stuff like that, and anything else related to that. And if you have questions that you want addressed, let me know. I don't think that narcissism and psychopathic behavior is quite where we want to go, but I'm open to other suggestions.
Well, I have a question or a comment, I guess. In working with people, I'm working a lot on their nervous system, which are way out there. So are you going to go back through the physiology and sort of come back and bring it into how it manifests itself? And that's what I'm dealing with all the time.
Yeah, you've asked that question before. I kind of think that's the job of the SIPS training and the other trainings you're taking in kinesiology testing, the methods and the modes. I certainly have a lot of that information. It'll be better, Lisa, if you just ask questions, ask specific questions, rather than ask me to take that on wholesale, which I think is more Alexis's job and in her classes. Alexis, would you agree to that? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is application of theory as opposed to anatomy, I think. And absolutely, that's stuff that we talk about in different classes. Or I'm not sure, Lisa, whether that's just being able to do more case studies or something with the brain integration stuff, or what you need support with. We can work with whatever.
Yeah, because I'm looking at a lot of people that I work with have nervous systems that are in fight or flight all the time. And so it's mainly emotional, but I'm just wondering if there's a way to just think about the anatomy and physiology.
Well, that's polyvagal. Lisa, that's polyvagal. Polyvagal is
Right.
to your question,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Okay. All right. I'm okay then. Yeah.
That's my answer for sure. Otherwise, Lisa, I want to encourage you to ask more questions and ask more specific questions, and that will help me help you. I think we're done recording unless there's other comments. So I'll circulate the notes and slides.
Thank you so much. I feel like that was really informative and helpful for everyone. I will go ahead and turn this off.